Her niece sold her wedding ring while she was still under anesthesia. Ruth Carter, retired schoolteacher and recent widow, didn't scream. Maya smiled through the lies, already redecorating the master bedroom. By the end of the month, the house would be gone, and so would Maya's name from every legal document that mattered. Ruth had raised her like a daughter. Now she was building a paper trail for war. And when Maya came back to claim what she'd stolen, Ruth would be waiting, with evidence, not forgiveness. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The room smelled like bleach and boiled linens. Everything hummed, soft, sterile, unreal. Ruth Ann Carter blinked against the blur of overhead lights, her body slow to return from whatever realm the anesthesia had taken her to. Something tugged at her chest. She reached up instinctively, fingers grazing bare skin beneath the thin hospital gown. The chain was gone. Her hand stilled. For a second, her brain tried to catch up, tried to tell her maybe it had slipped. Maybe the nurses had removed it. But no. That necklace had never left her since the day Dawn was buried. She'd worn it every night, through every birthday and back spasm and flu season. His wedding band, warm from her skin, had hung between her collarbones like an oath. Now it was gone. "Oh, Aunt Ruth, you're up!" The voice came too loudly, too brightly, like someone yanking open the curtains before dawn. Maya swept into view, ponytail high, makeup fresh, holding a styrofoam cup of peppermint tea. Her smile was wide. Too wide. "I was so worried," Maya said, sitting on the edge of the bed like it was hers. "You were out for hours. They said it went well, though. Clean incision, minimal bleeding." Ruth stared at her, eyes still glazed from the meds. Her throat felt dry enough to crack. Maya leaned in, brushing Ruth's hair back in that way she did when she was being theatrical. "You were talking nonsense earlier. Said you wanted to take your chain off, remember? You were real insistent. I told the nurse you'd be mad later, but you took it off yourself. Swear to God." The chain. The ring. Ruth's lips parted, but no sound came. Her tongue felt heavy, her limbs like sandbags. She tried to piece the words together. Did I ask? Did I say that? But the room floated again, the corners swelling inward like a dream, and Maya was already standing, adjusting the blanket, too busy smiling to notice Ruth's eyes sharpening under the fog. "I'll get the nurse," Maya chirped. "You need fluids. You look pale." Ruth let her go. She didn't blink until Maya's sneakers squeaked out of sight. A slow breath hissed between her teeth. 1999. Ruth opened the front door to find a 9-year-old Maya clinging to a pink duffel bag with a hole in the seam. Her cheeks were blotchy from crying, and her coat didn't match her shoes. Ruth's sister had died that morning. Car accident, slick roads, wrong curve. "She doesn't have anyone else," the caseworker had said. "Her father's not in the picture. You're it." Ruth had stepped aside. "Come in, baby." That summer, she'd painted Maya's new bedroom sunshine yellow, enrolled her in private school with the scholarship Dawn used to brag about, took her to Lake Wallenpaupack and Hershey Park, and even to Colonial Williamsburg, where Maya declared everything old and boring except the fudge. There had been PTA meetings, late-night fevers, braces, first crushes, all of it. Ruth never remarried. Dawn was enough. Maya became her center. "You're my girl," Ruth used to whisper when Maya cried herself to sleep on the anniversaries. "And I'm not going anywhere." Now, in this quiet room of buzzing machines and stale floral arrangements, Ruth felt the weight of that promise crack. She touched her collarbone again. The skin was still warm where the ring should have been. She closed her eyes and counted to 10, slowly, on instinct, like she used to when Maya threw tantrums as a teenager. Maya returned with ice chips and too many questions. "You good? You need anything else?" Ruth smiled, a little too gently. "No, honey. You've done enough." Later, when Maya stepped out to take a call, her voice chirpy again, probably to her boyfriend or one of those spiritual advisors she liked to text, Ruth noticed her niece had left her jacket slung over the hospital chair. A thin pink folder poked out of one pocket. She reached with aching fingers. Slow, careful. A folded slip of paper, white, smudged at the edges, The logo stamped in the corner said, Lancaster Gold Exchange. Ruth opened it. Her breath didn't catch, her heart didn't race. Instead, something old and very still moved behind her ribs. The paper felt flimsy between Ruth's fingers. Cheap thermal stock, the kind that curled if you left it on a windowsill too long. The ink was already fading in places, but the essentials were clear. Lancaster Gold Exchange. Date, yesterday, 1:47 p.m. Item, men's antique gold band. $160 employee ID, 2114 customer, M. Carter. Ruth stared at it. M. Carter. Maya always insisted on keeping Ruth's last name, said it made things easier for paperwork when she was in high school. Ruth had found it sweet once. Now it felt like camouflage. She turned the receipt over, blank on the back. She folded it in half, then into quarters. Her fingers shook, not from pain, not entirely, but from the stillness that settled in her chest. She was surprised by how quiet it felt, not betrayal, not yet. Something colder, like standing outside in snow and not realizing until later how much your hands had gone numb. The door creaked. Ruth slipped the receipt under her thigh, covered it with the blanket. Maya reappeared with 2 vending machine ginger ales and a magazine Ruth hadn't read in 10 years. "Look who's got sparkle in her cheeks again," she sang, all warmth and no substance. "I told the nurse we're gonna have you doing chair yoga by Friday." Ruth let her eyelids drift halfway closed. "You just focus on healing, okay?" Maya continued, straightening the tray table like a nurse on TV. "I've got everything else handled." Ruth made a small sound, somewhere between a murmur and a breath. She didn't speak, didn't have to. Maya patted her hand like it was a prop. "God, I wish you could have seen yourself after surgery. You were hilarious, kept asking for Don like he was down the hall. You even asked the nurse if she had your ring in her pocket." Maya laughed, a little too hard. "It's okay, though. You were out of it. Totally normal." Ruth nodded vaguely, like a woman who had no memory at all. She let her head tilt slightly to the right, the way it did when the meds were strong. It was a role now, and she intended to play it to perfection. Maya stayed another hour, fluttering around the room like a bird in a cage she didn't want to admit she'd built. She checked the monitors. She fluffed the pillows. She texted furiously when she thought Ruth was asleep. When she finally left, Ruth counted to 30 before opening her eyes. She eased her body upward, biting back the groan that crept up her spine. She reached beneath the blanket and pulled out the folded slip of paper. Still there, still real. She opened her bedside drawer. Inside, her Bible, leather-bound, gilded edges worn soft from years of sermons and grief. She hadn't touched it since Don died, not out of anger, just distance. But now it felt right, sacred again. She slid the pawn receipt into the inside cover, between the dedication page and Psalm 46. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Ruth's fingers lingered on the verse. Then she reached for her phone. The morphine still hovered at the edge of her thoughts, making the screen blur slightly, but she navigated to her contacts by muscle memory. Contact. Marianne. Trust attorney. Message. Need to review my trust paperwork. Urgent. Please, no calls. Text only. She hit send, watched the little bar crawl across the screen. A pause. Then the dots appeared. Typing. Reply. Of course. I'll pull your files now. Do you want me to visit the hospital? Ruth tapped back. Not yet. Just check the signature pages. She locked the phone, slipped it under her pillow, took a long breath through her nose. She'd taught public school for 30 years, read enough fabricated excuses to know when someone was improvising. Maya was improvising now, talking too much, smiling too wide, and Ruth wasn't groggy anymore. 2 days later, a nurse wheeled Ruth to the family lounge near the elevators, claiming they needed to sanitize her floor. Ruth knew better. Maya had been talking too loudly in the hallway again, about rehab centers, discharge timelines, and a place in York that gave discounts for long-term stays. She kept her hands folded neatly over the blanket in her lap and stared out the window. Her phone buzzed in her gown pocket. From Marianne. Pulled your trust files. Need to speak. Found something odd. Safe to call? Ruth texted back. No voice, text only. A pause. Then, the transfer doc is in your file. Dated last fall, signed. Ruth's stomach sank like it was falling through a floor. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard. I never signed it. Another pause. Then, you're absolutely sure? She didn't respond right away. She reached for the plastic pen clipped to her discharge folder, steadied her hand, and wrote her name on the back of an appointment card. It looked nothing like the signature Marianne had once notarized for Dawn's will. These days her pen wobbled on the upstrokes. Her left hand didn't track the loops the same. She hadn't signed a legal document in over a year, but the one Marianne sent her, a photo snapped hastily under office light, was smooth. Perfect. Signed Ruth Ann Carter in the same old right-handed tilt she'd lost after her shoulder surgery. She felt it then, that cold, mechanical fury. Not rage, not even heartbreak, just a system click in her head. She forged it. She thinks I won't live long enough to notice. Ruth tucked the phone into her lap and looked out the window again. It had started to snow, thick flakes falling sideways like they had somewhere to be. Maya arrived an hour later, full of weather complaints and faux concern. They're saying Route 30 might close. Can you believe that? She pulled off her gloves and coat like she owned the room. I'm gonna stock your fridge tomorrow so you don't have to stress when you get home. You still take oat milk, right? Ruth smiled. Always thoughtful. Maya beamed. You raised me, remember? Ruth nodded slowly. Yes, I remember. That night, when Maya finally left and the floor went quiet, Ruth asked a nurse to retrieve her tote bag from the supply closet. It had been stored during surgery, labeled with her name in Sharpie on a laminated tag. Inside, a leather portfolio she'd kept for 30 years. Dawn called it her nuclear binder. Birth certificates, property tax receipts, Dawn's honorable discharge papers, and copies of every trust draft they'd reviewed after his death. Ruth laid the copies across her lap, hands steady now. She examined the unsigned version of the living trust. It was supposed to be finalized last year, but she'd held off. She'd told Marianne she wanted to think about it through the holidays. Maya had been pushing her to sign ever since. She flipped to the back page. The signature block was blank, exactly as she remembered. Good. Next, she retrieved the manila envelope from the binder's back pocket. Signature samples, R.A. Carter, 2020 to 2023, a collection she'd started herself, half out of habit, half paranoia. Teaching for 3 decades meant documenting everything, even her own decline. She added the appointment card she'd just scribbled onto the folder, sealed it, labeled it in red ink. True signature history, notarized copy needed. Then she dug out her safe deposit key. It was taped to a folded sticky note, for records only. If you're reading this, trust nobody but Marianne. She stared at it for a long minute, then she reached for her phone again. Bring a document analyst, she texted Marianne. Quietly. Don't tip her off yet. The hospital's Wi-Fi was slow and spotty, but Ruth had taught dozens of 8th graders how to find buried sources with only a Chromebook and a sneeze-guarded keyboard. This was no different, just stakes instead of grades. She waited until Maya left for lunch. The nurse brought applesauce and muted concern. Ruth waved her off with a tired smile, then pulled her phone from under the pillow and tapped slowly through her browser's bookmarks. There it was. R. Carter, 1944. Her old eBay account, last used to sell Dawn's antique typewriter to a collector in Oregon. She'd kept the password written inside a fake contact in her phone under the name Kathy Ringer. Dawn always said no one questioned women named Kathy. She typed in antique gold band plus Pennsylvania and waited. The search page flickered. Then loaded. 3rd row, second from the left. Antique gold wedding band, $160, lightwear, ready for repurpose. The photo made her stomach turn. It was Dawn's ring, all right. She knew that soft bevel on the edge, the faint nick where he'd hit it on the garage door frame in '86. She remembered how embarrassed he was. It gives it character, he'd said, pressing it against her palm. Ruth clicked into the listing. The seller's name was a vague handle, Honeyheart08, no identifying picture, 2 previous sales, both for costume jewelry, new account. She clicked contact seller. Message. Hello, I'm interested in the ring. Do you have any history on it? I may want it for family reasons. Rebecca H. Lititz, P.A. It felt strange, writing as someone else, but the lie sat neatly on her tongue. 10 minutes later, the seller responded, "Sure, it belonged to my aunt's late husband. She asked me to get rid of it because it wasn't worth the memory. You know how grief is. Let me know if you want it. Name for shipping?" The profile email was visible in the PayPal preview, mayacarter84@gmail.com. Ruth didn't blink. She screenshotted the message, saved it to a secure folder. Reply, "I'll take it. Please ship to J. Abernathy, 7 Meadow Run, Lane, COT, Foster." The address belonged to her neighbor 2 doors down, Terry Foster, a retired widower who once swore on his 3rd glass of mulled wine that Ruth could use his mailbox anytime she liked, so long as it wasn't for criminal behavior or grocery coupons. She paid immediately, full asking price. The ring was hers again, not because Maya gave it back, because Ruth reclaimed it. Maya didn't mention the necklace that night, didn't ask if Ruth remembered taking it off. She was too busy planning. "I've been thinking about your recovery plan," she chirped, clicking through physical therapy pamphlets like a real estate agent with too many options. "You probably won't want stairs, right? So maybe we get a chairlift installed and move the master bed downstairs?" Ruth, no, dead softly. "Whatever you think is best." Maya's eyes lit up. "See? You're always so agreeable when you're not stressed." Ruth said nothing, just closed her eyes like she was fading again. But inside her mind, she was drawing a map, not of the house, of the war. 3 days later, Terry slid a small padded envelope through Ruth's mail slot at home with a wink and a "no questions asked" salute. Inside, the ring. Still warm from the bubble wrap, still his. She closed her fingers around it, pressing it to her chest like a rosary. The weight wasn't heavy, but the meaning was. She didn't put it back on the chain. Not yet. Not while Maya still hovered like a vulture playing nursemaid. She placed it in a velvet pouch she once used for Dawn's cufflinks. Then she slipped it into a zippered side pocket of her old purse, one Maya never touched, claiming it smelled like ginger mints and decades. Let her believe it was gone. Let her think the theft had worked. Let her never mention it again. The discharge papers said Friday. Ruth came home on Wednesday. She said the rehab center gave her a rash, said the food made her suspiciously bloated, said she'd rather recover in her own bed. None of it true, all of it accepted. The hospital signed her out with 2 pain prescriptions, a printout of post-operative care tips, and one nurse who hugged her a little too tightly. Maya was already parked in the driveway when the rideshare dropped Ruth off. The porch light was on, too bright for afternoon. Ruth moved slow on the steps, playing the part. Her hip was tender, but not broken. Maya rushed out like a stagehand late on cue. "You're early. God, I wasn't expecting. Well, come on then. Let's get you inside." Ruth nodded, her voice quiet. "I missed my floors." Maya carried the tote. Ruth carried the performance. Inside, something felt off. Not wrong, just adjusted. The scent of her lavender plug-in was gone, replaced with something artificial, vanilla bean and aerosol. The pictures on the mantel had been rearranged. Dawn's army portrait had been pushed behind a beach vacation frame that Ruth didn't remember taking. And the shoes by the door, Ruth's orthopedic pair, still bandaged at the heel, were gone. "Maya," she said carefully, "where are my clothes?" Maya didn't look up. "Oh, I moved some stuff around to make space. You'll be in the guest room now. Less stairs, you know. I figured we could do a Goodwill run later this week." Ruth said nothing. Maya led her down the hall with practiced cheer. Ruth caught a glimpse of her own bedroom, the master through the cracked door. Her comforter was gone, replaced with a blush-pink duvet. A yoga mat curled against the armoire. The nightstand was covered in jade rollers and serums. "You've been sleeping in my room," Ruth said. Maya turned, all innocence. "Well, yeah. Just while you were in surgery and stuff, it didn't make sense for it to sit empty." Ruth nodded again. "I suppose not." They reached the guest room. It smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and change. "I put some of your things in here already," Maya chirped. "Just the important stuff. I figured it was time for a bit of decluttering anyway. Ruth sat slowly on the edge of the bed. The mattress sighed beneath her like it remembered someone else. She waited a full beat before saying it. I'd like to go over the trust paperwork, just to remind myself where everything landed. Maya froze mid-step. What? The trust, Ruth repeated. I just can't remember what I signed. Morphine fog, you know? Maya blinked. You said I'd get everything. When you were gone. Ruth smiled faintly. Did I? Well, maybe I did, but I don't recall what that meant. Could you bring me the file? Maya hesitated. Just long enough. Then she forced a grin. Yeah, sure, I'll find it. She left the room. Ruth exhaled, controlled and even. She reached into her tote bag, pulled out the small navy notebook she'd kept since Dawn's funeral. The one with the gold ribbon bookmark and the initials RAC pressed in foil. On the first page, a quote Dawn had once underlined in a book about estate law: "If you don't control the pen, someone else will write your ending." She flipped to the back. Tucked inside was Marianne's text from 2 nights ago, printed from Ruth's old inkjet. The forged signature voids the trust. She has no claim. You're still full executor. Confirmed. Quietly proceeding. No claim. No inheritance. No ownership of this house. Maya had gambled on Ruth dying in a hospital bed, but Ruth had survived. That night, Ruth sat quietly at the kitchen table while Maya busied herself in the pantry, muttering about running out of almond flour. The light above the stove buzzed faintly. Ruth traced the edges of her tea mug with one finger. Maya, she said casually, do you remember if I signed the final trust document? I feel like it had a blue folder. Maya didn't turn around. You definitely signed something, I remember. You had your robe on. My red one? No. The navy. You were sitting on the couch. I had you initial 3 places. Ruth's eyes narrowed slightly. I haven't worn that robe since Dawn's funeral, she said softly. Silence. Maya turned slowly. Well, maybe it was something else? You were so tired. Ruth nodded, her voice almost kind. So were you. Ruth waited until Maya left for her Saturday meditation group, a weekly ritual that seemed to include equal parts yoga, overpriced smoothies, and carefully angled selfies in borrowed athleisure. Once the front door closed and Maya's car reversed out of the driveway, Ruth picked up her phone and scrolled to a name she hadn't tapped in months. Eli Jameson. Dawn's godson. The one who'd handled the reception RSVP list when Ruth couldn't stop crying long enough to remember who had gluten allergies. The one who'd driven her home from the cemetery without saying a word, just letting Sam Cooke play low on the radio. She tapped send message. Ruth, dinner next week? I could use a familiar face. The reply came in under a minute. Eli, wouldn't miss it. You cooking or ordering in? Ruth, if I'm cooking, bring wine. If I'm ordering, bring forgiveness. They laughed over dinner Wednesday night. Chicken piccata and roasted potatoes like Dawn used to make on We're Too Tired to Fight nights. Eli looked good. Older, a little more silver at the temples, but sturdy, grounded. Maya lingered during appetizers, hovering too long, feigning casual as she picked at an uneaten salad. Ruth smiled sweetly. Don't you have that book club tonight? The one with the bourbon and no books? Maya blinked, then forced a laugh. Oh, yeah, I guess I could head out early. She left 10 minutes later. Eli gave Ruth a look across the table. She always this fluttery? Lately, Ruth said. She thinks I'm still fading. Are you? Not even close. They cleared the plates and moved to the living room. Dawn's old vinyls still lined the shelves. Ruth pulled one at random, Chet Baker Sings, and let it crackle softly in the background. I need to show you something, she said. She led him to the den, to the desk Dawn built himself in '93. She pulled out the notebook, the signature samples, the screenshots of Maya's eBay sale. She laid it all out like a teacher returning graded exams. Eli leaned over, scanning each page with the practiced calm of someone who'd had to inventory the grief of others before. She forged this? He asked quietly, tapping the trust signature. Ruth nodded. Right down to the tilt in my R. She must have used old tax forms or something. Marianne confirmed it wasn't mine. Eli exhaled, leaned back. You want help? You've got it. I owe Uncle Don more than holiday cards and a Christmas bottle of scotch. He opened Ruth's laptop. Do you mind? Be my guest. Just don't click anything labeled recipes. I think I saved the chili one under Wills and Beans by mistake. They chuckled. The screen glowed in the darkened room, casting both their faces in a light that made them look like investigators in a true crime special. Eli opened the documents folder, scanned the recent history, opened the downloads, then paused. One folder sat slightly out of place, modified just a few weeks prior. Final papers. He double-clicked. Inside, 3 PDFs, 1 Word doc, and a scan of Ruth's signature lifted directly from a tax return dated 2018. He whistled low. Bingo. What is it? Proof, he said. She wasn't just forging, she was organizing. He clicked open the Word file, titled Will Draft Clean.x. The formatting matched the final trust. Same font, same layout, same language. He turned the screen toward Ruth. She stared at it. Her name in bold, her fake initials in the margin. Maya had saved it under Ruth's login, but the metadata? Eli clicked, File greater than properties. Last modified by Maya Carter 84, date modified, 2 days after your surgery. Ruth didn't speak. She didn't blink. She just reached out and clicked print. The machine in the hallway hummed to life. The document analyst's name was Geneva Klein, a quiet woman with sharp eyes and a voice like folded linen. She arrived 2 days later, wearing a slate gray suit and carrying a laptop so thin it looked like it could slice paper on its own. I don't need much, she told Ruth, gently easing into the den chair. Just 10 samples of your known signature, and the one in question. Ruth handed over the red folder Marianne had labeled Signature Comparison, Carter versus Carter, in her perfectly squared handwriting. Geneva laid the pages out side by side, her fingers moving with the economy of someone who'd testified in court before and never once been contradicted. Eli stood quietly in the corner, arms crossed, watching the analysis unfold like a slow, merciless autopsy. Geneva pointed. Your natural signature shows tremor lines, left-handed drag, consistent loop hesitation. She slid the forged trust signature beside it. This one? Her fingertip tapped the paper. No tremor, no hesitation, perfect arc on the H. Your left. Hand wouldn't be able to mimic this unless you'd been practicing with a ruler and tracing paper. She clicked open her laptop and projected the metadata logs onto the desk's surface using a pocket laser. File last modified from this IP address, she said, tapping the screen, matching the Wi-Fi in this home. User login, Maya Carter 84. Date stamp, 48 hours post-surgery. Eli let out a breath. Geneva glanced up at Ruth. It's forgery. With intent, Ruth nodded calmly. That's all I needed to know. By the following afternoon, the red folder had grown into a legal packet, rigid spine, plastic tabs. Marianne had added the pawn shop receipt, a screenshot of the eBay sale, and the metadata log annotated with Geneva's report. Ruth labeled the front herself, Document Trail, for immediate filing. She tucked it into the fireproof box beneath Dawn's old briefcase. Not in the safe. Maya knew the code. But the briefcase? She wouldn't touch that. Not after Ruth told her once, in the softest, most loaded tone, some things are sacred. Maya had never asked what was inside. Saturday morning, Eli arrived in jeans and a hoodie, his pickup parked discreetly around the block. They moved boxes slowly, methodically, from the attic and garage into the bed of his truck. Old tax returns, family albums, Ruth's teaching records, Dawn's medals, still in their velvet-lined case, all labeled, all sealed. By the time they made their third trip, Maya appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. What are you doing? Ruth looked up from a milk crate filled with photo albums. Organizing. For what? Ruth stood slowly, wiping her hands on the sides of her slacks. In case anything happens to me. Maya narrowed her eyes. You're not dying. Neither are you, Ruth said calmly. But we both know that hasn't stopped you from making plans. Eli loaded the last box without a word. Maya blinked. Are you seriously moving things out? Why would you? Ruth walked past her, steady as a tide. Because I don't want confusion about what's mine. She smiled, warm but razor thin. Maya opened her mouth, then closed it. That night, Ruth sat in her recliner, sipping lukewarm tea and watching the porch light flicker with the first hints of spring rain. Eli texted, "Storage locked. Document secure. Want to go over next steps tomorrow?" She tapped back. "Yes, after church. Bring donuts. The expensive kind. We've earned it." She smiled, just a little, closed her phone, then turned to the briefcase beside her chair. Inside, she slipped the legal packet into a fresh manila envelope, wrote 3 words on the label, "If she contests." The house never went on Zillow, no signs on the lawn, no glossy flyers or open house cookies. Ruth didn't believe in spectacle, only results. Her listing agent, a no-nonsense woman named Carla Simmons, had called it a quiet showcase. Select buyers, by appointment only. It keeps the noise out, she'd said, and the cash in. The first walkthrough happened on a Thursday afternoon. Ruth was in the kitchen, nursing a lukewarm cup of chamomile when she saw them. 2 strangers, a man and woman in matching windbreakers, stepping through the foyer with Carla at their heels. The woman stopped in front of the fireplace. "Original brick?" Ruth answered from her chair. "Don laid it himself in '94. Made me wait 2 months to hang stockings so the grout would cure properly." The man smiled. "Craftsmanship. You don't see much of that anymore." Carla nodded. "Exactly what I told them." Footsteps thundered down the hall. Maya's voice followed, sharpened, wild. "Excuse me, who are you?" The couple turned. Carla calmly introduced them. Maya's eyes darted to Ruth. "What's going on?" Ruth stood slowly, every movement deliberate. "They're touring the house." Maya blinked like someone smacked her with a blueprint. "Touring? What do you mean touring? This is your home." "I'm aware. You're selling it?" Maya's voice cracked, echoing too loudly off the vaulted ceiling. Ruth sipped her tea. "If it's going to be yours someday, shouldn't you know what it's worth?" Carla cleared her throat politely and ushered the couple into the backyard, giving Ruth a nod on the way out. Maya didn't follow. She turned toward Ruth, jaw tight. "You're being irrational." Ruth smiled calmly. "Maybe, but so far all my irrational ideas tend to hold up in court." Maya's face flushed red. "You're not well. You're acting erratic. I don't even know who you are anymore." Ruth didn't answer. Instead, she reached over to the counter and pressed record on her phone. The voice memo app lit up. Maya didn't notice. She was too busy pacing. "You raised me like your own," she hissed. You said I'd get this house. You told everyone." "I also said Don's banana pudding was edible," Ruth replied mildly. "Turns out I was wrong about both." Maya's eyes burned. "You're losing it. If I went to a judge right now, showed them the way you're acting, they'd ask to see the documents," Ruth cut in, "and I'd show them mine." Maya's voice dropped to a low hiss. "You're destroying everything for no reason." "No, Maya, I'm documenting it." She clicked stop on the voice memo. Saved. Backed up. Emailed to herself and to Marianne within seconds. Maya's lips moved, but no words came out. She stormed upstairs, slamming the master bedroom door with enough force to rattle the picture frames. Ruth exhaled and leaned against the counter. Her tea had gone cold again. She poured it out and brewed a fresh cup. That evening, as the sun cracked orange against the tree line and the porch light flickered on, Ruth sat in her recliner scrolling through emails. Subject line, "Offer received, 12 Elmsworth Lane." She opened it. Buyer, K. Romero, private investor. Offer, full cash, no contingencies, 14-day close. Her cursor hovered over the accept button. She looked up, let her eyes sweep over the living room, the one she and Don painted together in seafoam and regret, the one where Maya used to lie on the floor watching cartoons, hand tangled in Ruth's shoelace, just so she wouldn't wander off. Then she clicked. The confirmation came on a Monday morning so quiet it felt like the house was holding its breath. Subject, escrow initiated, 12 Elmsworth Lane, from Carla Simmons to Ruth A. Carter. Ruth read the email 3 times. No fanfare, just bullet points and legalese confirming what she already knew. The house was no longer hers. Not fully, and Maya still didn't know a thing. Ruth opened a fresh browser tab, typing slowly with her good hand. Cottage rentals, Lancaster County, month-to-month lease, furnished. Eli had already suggested a place. His friend owned a converted carriage house on the edge of town. Quiet, one story, a wraparound porch. Ruth had driven by it once after Don's funeral. She remembered thinking it looked like a place where people started over. She sent an inquiry under a different name. Ann Carter Thomas. The hyphen was her own private nod to the past. Thomas had been her grandmother's maiden name, strong, quiet, never claimed. The response came back by lunchtime. Move-in available next week. Deposit waived, paid in cash. Ruth closed her laptop and exhaled slowly. The game was no longer about winning. It was about completion. That night, Ruth began moving valuables out of the house in slow, deliberate passes, 3 boxes at a time, mostly at dusk. Don's coin collection, family photo albums, her teaching awards, a small bronze urn Maya had never asked about, the one with her mother's ashes. Eli handled the heavy lifting, always wearing gloves, always parking 2 blocks away. They spoke in shorthand. No lights. No wasted movements. On the 4th night, Ruth stood in the kitchen packing the last of her wedding china into a padded crate when she heard the unmistakable crunch of tires over gravel. Maya. The side door slammed open. Her voice landed in the room before she did. "What the hell is going on?" Ruth kept wrapping plates. "It's called packing." "For what?" Ruth didn't look up. "The house is in escrow. Should close next Friday." Maya blinked. Her voice dropped. No, it's not. You said it was just a valuation. You said," Ruth met her gaze now, calm, clear. "I lied, just like you did when you said I took off my necklace." Maya's face twisted. "You can't do this. I live here." "No," Ruth said, placing a teacup gently into the crate. "You stayed here. There's a difference." "You're kicking me out? After everything I've done for you? Like forging my trust? Selling Don's wedding ring? Putting your name on a document you didn't write?" Maya took a step forward. Her voice cracked like cheap ice. "I'll take you to court." Ruth smiled faintly. "That might be the first honest sentence you've said in months." "I have rights," Maya hissed. "You're not well. You're being manipulated. This is elder abuse." Ruth snapped the crate shut. "If you think I'm frail, I suggest you reread the escrow contract. I initialed every page. Twice." Maya's mouth opened, but Ruth was already turning, setting the crate down near the foyer, where Eli waited quietly, his presence solid as stone. "You stole from me," Ruth said softly. "So I sold the only thing you thought you had." Maya's eyes darted between Ruth and Eli. "You'll regret this." "No," Ruth said, stepping past her. "But I suspect you will." By dawn, the living room stood half empty, the mantel bare, the master bedroom stripped of its pink duvet and jade rollers. Ruth had left a folded note on the pillow. "Please water the fern. It's the only thing here that hasn't lied to me." She climbed into Eli's truck with her final overnight bag, the ring still zipped into the cufflink pouch at her side. They pulled away just as the sun cracked over the trees, bleeding gold through the rear view. Ruth didn't look back. The courthouse fax machine hummed at 8:13 a.m., spitting out pages with methodical clacks, each sheet marked with Marianne's signature and a tab at the corner that read, "Fraud, Primary, Evidence Enclosed." Ruth didn't attend the filing. She didn't need to. Her attorney sent a photo instead. 3 file copies lined up on the counter like sealed truths. Forged will, metadata analysis, PayPal screenshots, pawn slips, and the audio file transcript labeled Maya Carter, Verbal Threat Reinheritance. Marianne's message followed an hour later. DA's office acknowledged receipt. They'll reach out for interview next week. You've done everything right. Sit tight. Ruth closed the message and let the stillness fill her. The cottage was quiet, clean. It smelled like lemon balm and floor polish. She had 1 suitcase, a bookshelf half full, and a new kettle that whistled too politely. Outside, the maple trees rattled with early spring. She opened her laptop. Eli had created the blog himself, a clean black and white layout, No names, no locations, just a headline. I raised her like my own. Then she sold my wedding ring while I was under anesthesia. He posted it under the pseudonym Widow Sparrow 88. Ruth hadn't wanted to share it at first, but Eli had said, "It's not just about you anymore. This happens more than you know." The blog went live at 10:04 a.m. By lunch, it had 2,000 reads. By dinner, 14,000. A local watchdog site linked to it. Then a National Elder Justice Forum. Ruth didn't comment. She didn't refresh the page. She just left it open, like a candle on a windowsill. On Thursday morning, Maya's name appeared in an email chain she was never supposed to be in. Subject: Personnel Concern. M. Carter, from Human Resources, Lancaster School District, to Legal Affairs, Superintendent Review. The email was terse. A community member had submitted an anonymous tip. Attached were screenshots from the blog, links to property record changes, and a PDF of the pawnshop transaction. An investigation had been opened. Pending outcome, employee may be placed on administrative leave. Ruth didn't forward the message. Marianne already had it. The knock on the cottage door came at 6:43 p.m. Firm. Desperate. Ruth saw the shadow through the curtain before the voice followed. "Aunt Ruth, please open the door." She didn't. "Aunt Ruth, it's me. I just want to talk." Ruth opened the door slowly. Maya looked like something had been scraped out of her, hair tangled, face blotchy, makeup smudged like war paint. Her coat was half-buttoned. Her voice shook. "I'm sorry. I didn't think it would go this far. I wasn't trying to hurt you." Ruth said nothing. "I lost everything. My job's under review. People are calling me. They're calling me a thief. I didn't even sell the ring for that much. I swear, I was scared. I thought you'd leave me with nothing." Ruth's voice was quiet, even. "You left me with nothing. You took memories and turned them into merchandise." Maya's knees buckled. She sat on the porch step, shaking. "I made a mistake." "You made a decision," Ruth corrected, over and over again. "I didn't mean to." Ruth stepped outside, closed the door behind her. She looked down at the girl she once pulled out of a car wreck of a childhood, wrapped in a too-small coat with a duffel bag full of grief. "I raised you to be better," she said. "You chose otherwise." Maya sobbed openly now, gasping between syllables. "Please, I don't know where to go." "Then I hope you remember where you came from." Ruth walked past her, down the porch steps toward the garden gate. Maya didn't follow. The notary's pen moved in smooth, deliberate strokes across the last page of Ruth's new living will. Marianne stood nearby, arms folded, reading glasses perched low on her nose, watching Ruth sign with her left hand. Slow, careful, certain. 2 witnesses signed next. One was Eli. The other, Carla Simmons from the real estate office, who had arrived precisely at noon as promised, bearing both her signature and a box of lemon bars. Ruth sealed the folder with a firm press, then slid it into the locking file drawer behind her desk. Marianne nodded. "It's official. Your entire estate is now split evenly, Eli and the foundation fund." "Scholarships," Ruth said, "for girls from single households, especially ones who never got a second chance." Marianne's smile barely moved, but her voice carried weight. "The language is airtight." "And Maya?" "Explicitly removed by misconduct," Ruth replied. "Ineligible for contestation." Marianne packed up her briefcase, gave Ruth's shoulder a gentle squeeze, and left. The front door shut with a satisfying click, like the final note of a symphony she'd been humming for months. Ruth turned to Eli. "You staying for lunch?" "Only if you're ordering out. I don't trust your oven." She smirked. "Fair. It's older than the Constitution." They ended up eating cold chicken salad on rye at the kitchen table, the ring box sitting silently between them. Ruth pushed it forward. "You sure?" Eli asked, his voice low. "Don wore it until the day he couldn't lift his hand anymore," Ruth said. "I kept it close because I wasn't ready to let go, but it's not a shrine. It's a circle, and it belongs with someone who understands what it took to get it back." She opened the box. Inside, the antique gold band gleamed faintly, cleaned, resized, reset with a near-invisible engraving on the inside curve. RACDWC. Still here. Eli stared for a moment too long, then cleared his throat, swallowing something heavy. I'll take care of it. I know, Ruth said. That afternoon they moved to the living room, Don's old jazz records stacked on the coffee table like a shuffled biography. Chet Baker, Miles Davis, Etta Jones. Some worn, some pristine. Ruth dropped the needle on Kind of Blue and let the notes bleed through the open windows. They sat for a long time without speaking. Finally, Eli said, "It's quiet out here. That's the idea." He looked over. "Do you miss her?" Ruth traced the rim of her teacup. "I miss the version of her that never existed." Outside, a bird startled into flight from the garden fence. The trees whispered like old women with secrets. Ruth stood and fetched a cream envelope from the sideboard drawer. Stamped, sealed, addressed. Return to sender. Maya E. Carter. The letter inside was short, a formal cease and desist order written on Marianne's letterhead. No further contact permitted. Any attempts would be considered harassment under Pennsylvania Code 18. Ruth didn't reread it. She simply handed it to Eli. "Would you mind dropping this in the mailbox on your way home?" He took it without question. Of course. As the sun began to dip behind the hills, casting soft shadows through the linen curtains, Ruth turned the final record over and looked at Eli. "The past is heavy," she said, "but not every part of it has to be bitter." He raised his teacup like a glass of scotch. "To the parts worth keeping." She clinked her cup against his. That night, after Eli left and the last notes of Coltrane faded from the record player, Ruth stood by the window and watched the stars blink on above the tree line. Her house was gone. Her name was clean. Her inheritance was finally hers to give. Marianne laughed when the letter arrived. Not a joyful laugh. Not mocking either. It was the dry, exhausted chuckle of a woman who'd seen this play before and always knew how it ended. "They're calling it undue influence," she said, flipping the page and scanning the shaky wording of Maya's emergency petition. "Claims of emotional coercion, mental decline, alienation of affection. Honestly, it reads like a Hallmark movie with a concussion." Ruth stirred her tea calmly across the table. "Are we filing?" "Oh, absolutely. Fraud, attempted theft by deception, and willful misrepresentation." Marianne tapped the corner of her legal pad. "And for good measure, we'll include punitive damages and seek public record correction." Ruth didn't ask how long it would take. Some storms didn't require forecasts, only a dry place to wait them out. That weekend, the local paper picked up the story. Headline: Lancaster educator accused of forging elderly aunt's will during recovery. The subhead was even sharper: former caregiver suspended after family trust documents found to be altered. The article was careful, measured words, no full names, but it quoted from the affidavit Marianne had filed with the DA's office. It referenced the metadata, the pawnshop receipt, and the anonymous blog that had sparked the review. By Monday, the story made the rounds online. Shared, commented, quietly bookmarked by strangers who knew exactly how close to home it hit. Maya's name was removed from the faculty roster that afternoon. An email leaked from the district's HR office. Subject: Administrative Leave, M. Carter. Effective: immediately, pending conclusion of external investigation. Ruth received a dozen calls she didn't answer. One voicemail from a mutual friend who said, "I'm so sorry, we didn't know. You were always so generous with her." Ruth deleted it without listening to the rest. Instead, she drafted a short statement and sent it to Carla's niece, who worked as a reporter for the Morning Ledger. Ruth A. Carter. Public statement. Sometimes protection doesn't look like what we think it will. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like goodbye. No further comments at this time. Eli printed the story out and folded it into the back of the legal packet for safekeeping. "You want to frame this?" he asked with a smirk. Ruth shook her head. "Just keep the receipts." The court hearing was brief. Marianne stood with her posture straight as rebar, presenting exhibits in calm, clipped phrases, forged file logs, comparative signature reports, voice recordings, transaction histories. Each page reinforced the others. None contradicted. Maya did not speak on the stand. Her attorney, a man who looked barely old enough to rent a car, whispered with her throughout, eyes darting like he'd been handed a bomb disguised as a pro bono case. By the end of the session, the judge leaned forward, hands steepled. "The evidence presented leaves no ambiguity," she said. "Miss Carter knowingly and willfully altered estate documents for financial gain. Her actions constitute fraud under Pennsylvania law, and her removal from the trust was not only legal, it was warranted." Ruth didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She only nodded. Later that week, the county website updated its public registry. Financial exploiters, 2025 addendum name, Maya E. Carter. Status, verified report. Filed March 12, 2025. Category Elder Financial Abuse below it, a small link. More info. Ruth didn't click it. She already knew more than she ever wanted to. That night, she and Eli sat on the porch as dusk rolled in, painting the cottage in long lavender shadows. A wind chime rattled gently above the door. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, then quieted. Eli spoke first. "Feels final, doesn't it?" Ruth sipped her tea. "The paperwork's done. That's all the final I need." Eli hesitated. "And if she tries again?" Ruth looked toward the horizon, where the sky was split between pink and steel. "She won't," she said softly. "Not after what's coming next." The storage unit smelled like dust and old glue. Years of life packed into cardboard and plastic, neatly labeled in Eli's tidy handwriting. Ruth stood inside it. The corrugated door rolled high, afternoon sun pooling just shy of the threshold. The last box sat at her feet. Sharpie read, RAC, Final Archive. No sentiment, no flourish, just the end of things. She cracked the seal and lifted the flaps. Inside, a single sweater, too large, a photo album with 3 missing pages, and a zippered pouch that once held Maya's school records. Ruth sifted through each item without hesitation, placing what mattered into a small cloth tote and tossing the rest into a donation bin nearby. When she was done, there was nothing left of Maya in the unit. Not a note, not a strand of hair, no slivers of past affection, no ghosts of pretend family. Just space. She slid the lock back on the unit, dusted her palms together, and turned toward the car. Eli waited behind the wheel, engine running, old blues humming low through the speakers. They drove in silence to the cemetery. Don's headstone sat in the shade of a tall sycamore. It was simple, unfussy, just like the man. Donald William Carter, 1943 to 2009. Still here. Ruth knelt, knees creaking but steady. She pulled a small river stone from her coat pocket and placed it on the flat edge of the granite. Jewish custom, though neither of them were Jewish. Don just liked the idea. "Better than dead flowers," he used to say. "Stones stay put." Underneath it, she tucked a folded photo. The two of them on the back porch, arms around each other, lemonade glasses in hand, sunset turning their hair to fire. And beside it, she placed the ring. The real one. Polished, warmed by touch. "Don't worry," she murmured. "It's back where it belongs now." Eli stayed a few respectful paces behind until she stood again. She didn't cry. That part of her had been rinsed out years ago, in the early mornings after the funeral, in the quiet of too many unshared cups of coffee. Back at the cottage, Ruth opened another box, this one labeled China, Wedding. She had meant to keep it. For what? She wasn't sure. No heirs, no children. Maya had once said she wanted the set only if it comes with a new dishwasher, and Ruth had laughed then, but the words settled strange after. She carried the box to the trunk of her car. The next day, she drove it to the Lancaster Shelter for Families. The woman at the desk blinked when Ruth told her what was inside. "Wedding china?" Ruth smiled. "They might need it more than I do." The woman nodded slowly. "You want a receipt? Number just make sure someone gets to celebrate something beautiful on it." The woman blinked twice, then reached across the counter and gently patted Ruth's hand. That evening, Ruth pulled her reading glasses on and reviewed the onboarding paperwork for her new role, GED prep 3 days a week. Mostly women, mostly second chances. She'd circled one sentence on the pamphlet in red ink. Every student has a story. Our job is to make sure they get to write the ending. Eli called just after sunset. You really going back to teaching? Ruth chuckled. Not the kind with bells and hall passes, just enough to keep my mind sharp and my heart from rusting. You ever get tired of being the good one? She paused. You think this is goodness? He thought a moment. It's something better. It's what comes after survival. Ruth walked to the porch, the air cool, lavender curling off the potted herbs beside the door. No photos of Maya hung in the house, not out of spite, but clarity. Some stories didn't earn their place on the wall, but Don still watched from the mantel. Young, in his uniform, chin stubborn, eyes kind. Ruth looked out at the moon, rising steady and unspectacular, a quiet monument to everything she'd lost, and everything she chose not to carry forward. The conference room was small, windowless, and humming with too much air conditioning. Ruth sat at the far end, a styrofoam cup of decaf cooling in her hand and a volunteer badge clipped to her lapel. It read, R. Thomas, a name only half true, but fully hers now. She listened as another speaker recounted the details of a daughter who had drained her mother's retirement account while pretending to help with online banking. There was nodding, a few gasps, a small chorus of quiet grief that hummed just beneath every sentence in the room. When it was her turn, Ruth didn't stand at the podium. She simply adjusted the microphone where she sat and began, I'm not here to shame. I'm here because silence is a predator's favorite weapon. She didn't name Maya, didn't mention towns or timelines, but she spoke about anesthesia and missing heirlooms, about signatures she never gave, about how betrayal doesn't wear a mask, it wears memory, it wears family. The room stayed quiet when she finished. A different kind of quiet, the kind that means, we heard you. Afterward, a woman with tightly curled gray hair took Ruth's hand. I thought I was the only one. Ruth held her gaze. None of us are. Weeks later, Eli forwarded her a link with a subject line that read simply, You're trending again. The blog post had passed 500,000 views. Widow Sparrow 88 had become something of an avatar, anonymous, sharp, dignified. Advocacy sites linked to her story. Financial ethics panels requested quotes. And one quiet Friday, a national podcast on elder justice dedicated a full episode to the Lancaster Will. Ruth never listened to the recording. She didn't need to hear what she'd already lived. Eli, ever the builder, had quietly registered a nonprofit using part of his inheritance, the Carter Foundation for Financial Clarity. Small at first, just a newsletter, a digital pamphlet, an email hotline. But the stories started coming in like water through a crack in concrete. A retired nurse in Des Moines whose nephew remortgaged her house, a veteran in Fresno whose grandson sold his medal collection, a schoolteacher in Georgia who found out too late that her sister had power of attorney, without permission. Ruth helped draft the content, not the numbers, not the legalese, just the sentences that wrapped around pain like gauze. You are not foolish. You are not alone. She printed that one and taped it above her desk. The last she heard of Maya came in the form of a database update forwarded from Marianne's paralegal. New address, Springfield, Illinois. Name change, Maya Ellison Employment. Status, unknown. No legal actions pending. No contact attempted. Ruth read the entry once, then archived it. That night, while Eli sorted donor letters in the living room, Ruth stood in the kitchen sipping ginger tea and watching the porch light buzz. She remembered when Maya first came to live with her, a bag too big for her small frame, clutching a stuffed bear by its tail. She had asked, "Is this my new forever house?" And Ruth had answered yes, without hesitation, without doubt. Sometimes love is loud, sometimes it's wrong. Later, as they packed up the last of the foundation flyers for next month's community meeting, Ruth caught Eli watching her. "What? You ever wonder where she went?" he asked. Ruth folded the last box closed. "Only enough to be sure I'm not following." The moonlight stretched over the floor in long silver stripes. Ruth touched the edge of Don's old desk and smiled. "So much of what we lose," she said, "we carry anyway. But every now and then, You get to choose what stays. Outside, a dog barked in the distance. The porch light flickered once, then steadied. In the next room, a fresh envelope sat stamped and sealed for the county clerk, containing a statement, a donation receipt, and a brief typed message. Still here, still watching, still writing the ending. The knock came just after 9. 3 gentle taps, no insistence. Ruth wiped her hands on a dish towel and opened the door to a man in a charcoal apron and thick-rimmed glasses, carrying a slim box wrapped in cream paper. "Mrs. Carter?" he asked, though his voice suggested he already knew. She nodded. "I'm from Levington Jewelers. Mr. Jameson said you were expecting something." She smiled. "Come in." He stepped inside, eyes briefly scanning the warm clutter of bookshelves, thriving potted plants, and the faint scent of citrus cleaner. The cottage was humble but full of quiet victories, full of space that had been emptied and rebuilt, repurposed and reclaimed. The man set the box gently on the entry table and unwrapped it with the precision of someone used to handling time itself. Inside, the gold band. Restored. Polished to a whisper shine. The engraving inside. RAC-DWC. Still here. Now laser refinished, no longer faint. Ruth touched it once, her fingers tracing the familiar warmth. "You cleaned it well." "We didn't change the shape. Not even the nick in the edge," the man said, gesturing reverently. "Some things are part of the story." She nodded. "Exactly." He left with a soft thank you and a kind smile. Ruth stood alone in the doorway for a moment longer, watching the early sunlight stripe across the porch rail. Then she turned, ring in hand, and walked to the cedar chest in the corner of the living room. From the top drawer, she pulled out a small velvet pouch. It was navy, with a drawstring faded from years of opening and closing. A tag had been sewn to the inside lining, her own handwriting stitched in soft thread. "Final item." She placed the ring inside, tugged the pouch closed, and set it gently in the back of the drawer. Behind old church programs, Don's cufflink case, and the deed to the cottage, now paid in full. No monuments, no showcases, just safekeeping. Later, Ruth walked a slow lap through her home, her hand grazing surfaces like a curator of the life she had chosen, not inherited, not borrowed, not rescued. Books lined the wall in crooked stacks. Her plants, once leggy and root-bound, now bloomed in full. The lemon tree by the kitchen window had started to flower again. The laundry basket was half full. The floor beneath the rocker creaked just enough. Everything was as it should be. She made herself a cup of ginger tea, added a splash of milk the way Dawn used to hate, and settled into the rocker by the window. The breeze slipped through the cracked pane, carrying the scent of rosemary and something far older, maybe clean paper, maybe spring. Ruth reached for her journal. The cover was soft leather, worn along the spine. Inside were pages of clipped newspaper headlines, quotes from books, the beginnings of stories she might never finish. And in the middle, a page titled in red ink. What comes after beneath it, she wrote slowly, deliberately. "Forgiveness isn't required. Peace is." She set the pen down, closed the book. Outside, the wind stirred the chimes, 5 brass rods that sang like a memory just outside reach. Ruth let her eyes close, not in exhaustion, but in exhale. Her shoulders dropped, her hands rested lightly on the arms of the chair. Not asleep, just content. The light shifted across the floorboards like an old record coming to the end of a song. No photos of Maya sat on the shelves, but Dawn still stood guard from the mantel, steadfast, uncomplicated, never revised. The past no longer whispered like a wound, it simply sat in its place. She stole the ring. I reclaimed the life.